Coming up on this episode of Belief Hole.
Any good witch or occultist will tell you everything has to be undone. So if you build a sacred circle and you put pieces in place for this ritual, everything has to be undone in that order. You have to banish the spirits or whatever came.
You got to move the planchette on the Ouija board down to goodbye.
Exactly.
You can't leave it open.
If you don't, then you are leaving the doorway open, which is what happened at Loch Ness.
You hear the terrifying stories about someone at night alone in their home, and then there's this giant dog man tapping on the window with a giant grin. And of course, it's going to look terrifying. But what if he's just smiling like, hello?
Can we play?
Can I have some tea?
I'd still err on the side of caution and say don't approach.
Yeah, either way.
Don't let them in.
Yeah. People get chimpanzee pets, and you know how that ends. Fingerless, noseless, house guests.
I don't want to think about chimps. Chimps are terrifying.
The plans are this is going to be the first time where they want to develop it into a public space for people to vacation.
Sounds like a beautiful place to visit.
That's called demon
Come
food.
let the demons ride on your back as you go.
Take a ride on demonic
Nessie and shuttle them back to your homestead.
It always seems like it comes down to, it's never a good idea to try to summon something. You're a human person trying to grapple with these eternal concepts.
You have no control over it at all.
It's a lot of hubris to think, I'm going to be the one that can
harness the power. You're conjuring demons so that you can harness them to create good, right?
Right.
Well, when you say it like that,
Conspiracy,
synchronicity, Sasquatch,
Donald Trump,
alien races, Satanism in Hollywood, MK Ultra,
Pleiadians,
Mandela effect,
close the door, Ed.
Jury,
Close your door. Snowflakes,
inner Earth, disagreements,
my lab,
JFK assassination,
Flat Earth.
Corey Feld, magicians are demons, specters and spooks, sleep paralysis, Muslim Islamicist, the gender spectrum, alternative history, shadow people.
Shh, quiet, I'm trying to say words with the mouth.
Psilocybin, sorcery, poltergeists, sulforaphane, evolution, is it real?
Skull and Bone, Elf Tower. I would never talk about it. That's old. Y2K.
Cover-ups, the Oklahoma City bombing, vampire.
Well, hello.
well, hello.
Hi.
This is our second attempt at this recording because I effed up the first one.
Sure did.
Sorry about that.
You've been forgiven. You don't need to apologize.
Thank you.
Welcome back, listeners, to episode 27.
27, almost to heaven.
Almost there, guys.
It's creepy.
One more episode.
No, heaven.
That was a little final.
It's not the end, it's the beginning.
It's the beginning of the start.
I want to live for a while longer yet. We got more episodes to do.
No, heaven just means that we've made it to like a good spot.
In the podcast?
Yeah, and then we do it forever.
Belief Hole will be eternal.
I think it'll be necessary in heaven to have podcasts.
Yeah, they're going to need entertainment.
Is there a heaven, or do we just live in like more lives and different worlds and dimensions?
I think you sit on a cloud and play a harp
God, that sounds
for
awful.
eternity.
That sounds so boring.
And weren't you afraid of that when you were growing up?
In Sunday school, that terrified me. The idea of like I'm stuck on a cloud.
You're like, Dad, I don't want to die. I'm just going to be playing harps in heaven.
That's a scary thought. I always like the Mormon idea. I think it's Mormon, where you get like your own
10
planets.
lives?
Your own like planets to build.
Yeah, a bunch
you,
of
like,
wives.
help civilizations out on different planets. And
That would make more sense to me. It seems like it'd be weird to just go to one place and then that's it.
yeah.
I'm not in charge, so I don't make the rules.
John's not in charge.
That would be how I would do it, though.
And I like the idea that the potential of reincarnation and that it's a family link. So like you are the reincarnation of your great-grandfather maybe, or great-grandmother.
What if you knew your great-grandfather, though? That'd be a little awkward.
Yeah, it's got to be a little further out than that.
Well, I mean, not for us. Our grandfather was long dead.
It's a case-by-case basis,
Okay,
Jeremy.
okay. Thank you for clarifying.
That's the fact.
So anyway,
Today's episode
is going to be on the Black Shuck. Crickets.
I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it before.
I know. So if you're not familiar with that, you would be if you lived in the UK, say in East Anglia specifically, but it's part of this larger black dog phenomenon. And we'll get into this coming up, but it foretells doom and gloom. It's got a deep, dark history and lore to it. So that's going to be interesting to get into with some potential nodes of modern proofs or evidences.
Science?
Maybe not. Science.
Science?
Science.
Maybe not science. No, we'll get into it. It's going to be interesting. But this episode is going to be based around creature conjurings, summonings, and that's going to lead into
Allister Crowley and Loch Ness.
It's going to lead into
We talked about
Chris's
that
part.
kind of briefly, like a couple.
We did. We've
shows
mentioned
ago,
it
didn't
before.
We? And I was like, "What? That's so weird, dude."
Yeah. It is because it's a bizarre thing to.
It's really strange. I can't even believe that there's a link there.
It is, but when you start to look into it and you break it down, you realize that it kind of explains a lot of the situations with a lot of this cryptozoology stuff where you have these really seemingly bona fide sightings by intelligent people, credible people, but this lack of evidence. And when you start to consider the angle that there's a supernatural element to these things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness, and when there's history backing this up when it comes to Allister Crowley living in Loch Ness, specifically for ritualistic purposes because of the area, because of the home that he purchased, you start to make these connections and you start to think maybe all along it hasn't been an escaped dinosaur, or not a surviving dinosaur, but instead maybe some sort of elemental or spirit
or
interdimensional.
the
Exactly.
Loch Ness monster.
That's why they comb the loch.
Yeah.
If there's nothing there.
Yeah, and my argument to that
Or
was...
it could just be not real at all.
Possible.
We're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because we'll get into all this.
We're giving
coming up here.
tasters.
But yeah, that argument with the dredging the loch, I remember when they did that, I was so excited because when I was in 6th grade, we had career day. And the career that I picked was cryptozoologist, and I looked it up online.
You knew what that was at that age?
Yeah.
You looked it up online?
I looked up online to see if
They had online back then?
They had the dial-up internet. I had a...
Yeah, bear in mind it was 1996. That was back when cryptozoology wasn't a known thing. It was a very, I think we discovered it because we found some books in our library.
Yeah, we were into this stuff because our uncle was into a lot of paranormal stuff. He gave us some books. And so I was fascinated by all these cryptids, right? Like Bigfoot, Loch Ness. And that's what I want to do with my life. I was like, it's important that we clarify what these things are. They're a part of our reality. We need to figure this out. And I want to do that. And I found the official term for it. And then I looked up any colleges that offered degrees in cryptozoology in 1996. And there
Harvard?
was 0, but there was one college in California that offered 1 class in cryptozoology. And then I switched my 6th grade projected major to radio astronomer because I just saw Contact.
Oh, yeah, great movie.
But in any case, so Loch Ness was always my favorite.
You didn't do either of them. But you're kind of doing it now a little bit.
Yeah, I was, I get to be an armchair researcher for this stuff. But when they dredged the loch and they didn't find anything, they did snap a photograph. I don't know if it was during that investigation or another, of what looked like a fin of a plesiosaur.
Yeah, that was big news.
Yeah, my argument to that, and I'm sure other people have said this too, is the loch is filled with a lot of caverns, like underwater, where, something could hide out. If something's coming dredging and you've got a, fairly intelligent creature underwater, it could hide.
Yeah, and it's over a fault line.
It's over a fault line. But in our episode today, we're going to be discussing another way that it might not have been found, which would be the ethereal side of these kinds of, quote, cryptids.
Right.
The creatures that may not just be physical. We see that a lot with Bigfoot. We see that a lot of these things seem to blend and merge, these bizarre encounters. You can't quite capture them. You can't quite get the evidence. And there seems to be a supernatural bent to these things.
Yeah, and if you listen to our episode, I think it was the UFO, the Men in Black episode, we discussed a little bit of John Keel's work and Jacques Vallée's work, and the concept that some of these phenomenon might be something what they refer to as ultra-terrestrials, which are things that are shapeshifters.
Right.
That can move from shape to shape. Anything from Bigfoot, Loch Ness, even UFOs. I mean, it seems like a crazy idea, but when you start to really look into it, it explains a lot of the inexplicable experiences that people had.
It's kind of a universal...
That was a good comment.
Why do you think I dinged it?
See, sometimes ding means you're going on too long, and sometimes it's encouraging.
Ding is reinforcement.
Oh, okay. From now on...
It's almost always
for people who listen to the show are going to remember that ding, when you started it, was for time's up.
Change topic.
Well, it's been a long time.
We need like a snore sound effect for when it's going on too long.
Wait, hold on, let me find it. Maybe I can find one real quick. No.
But yeah, that kind of unifying theory of the paranormal, right? The John Keel idea where all this stuff kind of connects in this Goblin Universe kind of way.
Ooh, Goblin Universe.
Right?
Good call out.
Well, I thought you might be mentioning that coming up in the episode. So that's what we're going to be getting into today.
Yeah. And to me, what was so fascinating about this concept is that there's a lot of history within the past 100 years involving Allister Crowley, involving rituals that were done at Loch Ness and things that ensued afterwards that were strange and dark and, tragic for some people that occurred around this area of the loch.
I wanted to just mention... We have stingers, just so the people that...
Oh, yeah, coming up on the show.
Yeah, they'll be at the end probably, right?
They'll be close to the end, yeah. just so we can get into the meat.
Zayden Star Shadow?
Yeah.
Stick around for those guys. We're working them out right now. So we're going to try to introduce them at least at the beginning so you know if you're,
So you know
if you're one
you're
of the
coming
patrons.
up. Yeah.
Let's get to the meat.
Okay, so to the meat of the show, everybody. Oh, should we also mention that our idea, because this is usually where the news would go.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
So,
We're not doing the news anymore.
okay, so yeah, before we get to the meat, okay,
go
so
ahead.
here's our concept, guys, out there in listener land, our belieflings, our holers,
Our holers. That's so wrong.
we have a new idea. And the idea is the news. At the beginning of our show is going to be stricken from the record. It's going to be exercised from our episodes, potentially with the idea of making it its own episode that drops in between episodes, that where we can analyze what's going on in the weird world that we live in the moment. And that way it's separated out from our topic-based episodes.
Just so we can get into it a little quicker.
Yeah, and so the episodes are more concise with what we're talking about.
Right.
And
Because we tend to tangent.
we definitely tangent.
We rant and go all over the world of insanity. And
I think that's why we're right. If we do those episodes of like things that are happening in our world right now, then I think when we try to do those with topic episodes, then this episode would be called something like Allister Crowley, Loch Ness Connection, Black Shuck, and then we'd have all the news things in there like Bigfoot attack in national parks,
Right.
kid in India with 49 teeth.
no, 450.
What?
Ooh,
I want to read it right now.
It's a shark human
that's
hybrid.
a news thing you found? Okay, so we're getting into the news already.
No, we're not going to do that. But I will read that when it's ready.
Oh, and people asking
Get a
us.
sack of teeth.
People asking us, we should say this because people keep asking about storming Area 51. And I wanted to just mention that briefly. A couple things, how I think about it. I think it's an awesome idea that people want to like take up arms and just go plant themselves and
Well,
approach.
okay.
Not take up arms. Sorry, that was a meta.
Yeah, let's not encourage inciting violence.
Do not bring a gun to Area 51.
Jeremy.
You will be shot.
Let's get real.
It is a military or government installation.
Yeah.
Do not bring a weapon. What I meant was like get together and go, plant yourselves.
Just go rush the building.
Right, yeah. It might be dangerous, but the reason why I think it might be ill-conceived, even though it would be a fun adventure and we should go.
I don't think anything's there.
If people are going to go, we should go. But yeah, I think people are focusing on the wrong thing, and I think that might be by design. So one point is, first of all, Bob Lazar, even in his earliest interviews when he first came out, said, there's nothing at Area 51. Pretty much. He said that
S2.
You wouldn't
S4.
know about it if it was there,
Yeah,
right?
S4 is the place where he had worked the installation. As far as he knew, Area 51 was a non-starter as far as having UFO or alien aircraft. So that's number one. Number two, you think whoever organized this in the first place, and they say, we're going to wait till September, right? It's instead like late September or
Right.
something, when people can get time off, I guess. But you're giving all that time for, if there was anything, these people could move everything, Like,
yeah, not that you get in there anyway.
pack things up on trucks you don't want people to see
I
and
heard
move it out.
Facebook just took off the page that was
Storm Area 51.
promoting the
Oh,
event.
really?
I
Yeah.
can't even imagine that it was that. I mean, I know it was started as a joke anyway. I'm
Yeah.
sure there are some crazy guys out there that would go and think
it's
they're
not.
actually going to
But
go
it's
in
not
there.
just crazy people. Like our friend Jake, who works at the cocktail bar in town.
Oh, right.
Really great guy. I talked to him twice. We talked because it'd be fun to go. Like it's just a
Right.
cultural
Well, that's what I
event.
mean.
It's the Woodstock of aliens.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. It became like a fun event, but I don't think that many people took it seriously. Like we're going to get answers by storming on the base and surviving.
You would get killed too if you tried to rush a government. I
Right.
don't think they would take that stuff
It
lightly.
is hilarious, and I don't know if you guys saw this. I sent it in the group message, but I was on Tinder. Not that I ever actually end up using it.
Go on.
Were you Chris?
And a little ad popped up that said, "Are you going to Area 51 2019? Click yes to have this badge put on your profile." I was like, "Yeah, I'll put that on." So put it on, and then all of a sudden it shows you all of the ladies that have said they're going, and they have a little alien badge on their profile.
Weird.
It's like this has crossed the line of ridiculousness,
Dude,
So, like-
yeah, it's so not cool.
Alien UFO lore hookup.
Yeah.
Area 51 hookups. Weird. Very strange.
But yeah, that stuff's long gone. I mean, Area 51 was declassified, in 2013 or something
I mean,
like that?
Independence Day with Will Smith, Welcome to Earth. I mean, that like everyone knew it's been in the public mind for so long with X-Files and everything. And Bob Lazar said at the beginning that there was
Yeah.
nothing there. So I didn't want to get into this episode. I thought that'd be a cool like side episode maybe
You
to
did
do.
have some people write in and ask
Yeah,
about
we
it.
had someone in Castbox.
Yeah.
Was it Ray Lynn or?
That sounds right.
Nothing sounds more interesting than a million citizens raiding a government facility and finding aliens.
Right.
But unfortunately,
not gonna
that's
happen.
not the way it would play out.
Right. This is why it feels like controlled disinformation because you're promoting awareness for a facility that I'm sure doesn't have anything.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to get on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can see craft maybe in the skies around there. Maybe there's testing.
And
but-
in relating to our show tonight, I just saw today somebody posting something on Facebook that was Storm Loch Ness. It's like, well, okay.
Storm Loch Ness.
Storm Loch Ness. It's not a protected. Go and swim and drown?
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Everybody get your gear, scuba suits on, and
They're like running into each other outside
The Crowley summoned beast is going to rise up from the depths and be like, you got me.
Yeah.
It was me. I'm an evil demon.
Hold on.
Thank you. I know it's positive now.
It is. It never was negative. It was only negative once.
the first time.
First time, and that was the last time.
You remember your first?
Okay.
Black Shuck, Jeremy, you ready
Black
to get
Shuck. You guys ready to get into, as Chris said, the meat?
in? Demon dogs?
Let's get into it, guys.
Hellhounds, right?
Okay, so this is the thing. With the Black Shuck seems to be,
I don't like that name.
The
for
Black
some reason.
Shuck.
The Black Shuck. Okay, the Black Shuck.
yeah. I think I made a note of the etymology of that word in here somewhere. The Black Shuck, you mentioned hellhounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea, it seems to be, the more that you look into this, that it fits into a larger structure of a paranormal icon as the hellhound, which has cultural and mythological reachings back through time. I'm going to read a quick thing that I wrote up just to get my thoughts out about the Black Shuck. Are you ready?
Do it.
Do you got a lightning strike? The Black Shuck, Old Shuck, Galley Trot, or Padfoot, is the name given to a ghostly black dog which is said to roam the coastline and countryside of East Anglia. His terrifying presence manifests as a fire-eyed, shaggy black canine whose massive size has at times been reported as the size of a horse. Black Shuck seems to be part of a black dog-type phenomena, sometimes a furry and fierce harbinger of doom, while other times a protective companion or even rescuer. Accounts of these black dogs or hellhounds stretch back not only through ancient local lore, but are prevalent across cultures and are still encountered to this day.
Yeah, remember when Kurt Russell encountered him on the highway in the movie Black Dog?
Wow. Way to really... Thanks, Chris. Exclamation point on my creepy write-up of the black dog.
I mean, that's a phenomenon that happens over here all the time.
What? The movie Black Dog didn't have a black dog in it.
No, but it was named after highway truckers who have the profession of driving long nights over long highways cross country. There's a phenomenon of seeing black dogs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's supposed to be tied to staying up too long, driving long stretches of road, but there's a little bit of a supernatural feel to that phenomenon because it's a common vision. Is
Okay,
that black
well, we can
dog,
get into
yeah.
the more to that.
It was a joke, but there's some truth to it.
Okay. We can get into more of that in the follow-up because, there is this kind of like larger black dog phenomenon, which you might have experienced with Jake, John, your pup. I'm just going to go over a few accounts of this thing. So this is something that we don't know about this here in the U.S. very much. It's not a really well-known cryptid or paranormal phenomenon, but in the UK, it's the more I read about it online, it's almost like they're Bigfoot in a sense. You have football clubs or soccer teams named after it. You have pubs, the Black Dog Pub everywhere. And it stretches back through history. So
Is this a dog man?
it's a dog, but there are things that have similarities with the Dogman, which we've covered in the past. Check out that episode.
Like what? Smoke cigarettes and trench coats?
No, like the guarding of graveyards or the being around graveyards, right? That's an oddly prevalent attribute to the Dogman. Like you have a lot of reports of a werewolf or Dogman in and around graveyards, which sure, graveyards are spooky and werewolves are scary.
Right.
But there's something to this idea of protecting a treasure or a sacred ground that these beasts are tasked with in their ethereal lives. It's strange, but it goes throughout cultures. So I'm going to get into it a little bit.
Okay.
So the Black Shuck, as I said, it's primarily in Suffolk and Norfolk and East Anglia in England. I'm going to read an excerpt here. This is from the first written account of the Black Shuck. This is by Reverend E.S. Taylor. This goes back to 1850. It's from his journal, Notes and Queries. It describes Shuck the dog fiend. Quote, "This phantom I have heard many persons in East Norfolk and even Cambridgeshire describe as having seen as a black shaggy dog with fiery eyes and of immense size and who visits churchyards at midnight." So there it goes back to that similar
gravesite sort of thing.
Yeah, gravesite guarding kind of mythos that these dog figures have, including the Dogman. So another account. Sorry, I didn't realize that was all I had for that account. But another, that was really
His
brief,
face
sorry.
just went bright red right when he said that.
Shoot, that's the only account.
He's like, so.
I thought that account was longer. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few different accounts here, so you can get a feeling of the connective history in literature. The written accounts. Okay, so this comes from W.A. Dutt in his 1901 Highways and Byways in East Anglia, and this is how he describes the creature. Quote, "He takes the form of a huge black dog and prowls along dark lanes and lonesome field footpaths, where although his howling makes the hearer's blood run cold, his footfalls make no sound. You may know him at once, should you see him, by his fiery eye. He has but one eye, and that, like the Cyclops, is in the middle of his head. But such an encounter might bring you the worst of luck," sounds like the Banshee, It is even said that to meet him is to be warned that your death will occur before the end of the year. So you would do well to shut your eyes if you hear him howling. Shut them even if you are uncertain whether it is the dog fiend or the voice of the wind you hear. Should you never set eyes on our Norfolk Snarlyow, you may perhaps doubt his existence, and like other learned folks, tell us that his story is nothing but the old Scandinavian myth of the Black Hound of Odin.
Yeah.
Brought to us by the Vikings who long ago settled down on the Norfolk coast.
Shuck your eyes.
Go shuck yourself, sir.
Snarlyow.
Snarlyow. I knew
that's
you'd
great.
reference that. So
Snarlyow.
in W.A. Dutt's 1901 classic, Highways and Byways in East Anglia, he says Snarlyow. It's referencing an earlier work from the 1800s. I guess that was a term used. It was about a ship, and it was like a difficult dog on the ship or something. Any listeners who's familiar with the work, you can let us know. But that's where that term comes from, the snarl.
Well, it just makes you think yow. Makes you think of yowie, like the Australian Bigfoot.
Yeah,
you know,
snarl, as they are known to do.
That's a great name.
It is. Snarl, yeah. That'd be an awesome band name. Okay, so I'm just going to move through these quick. And remember that Norwegian, that Nordic connection, because that comes back up, the Viking connection. Because as I said, this goes through the lore of many different cultures.
It's East Anglia too, right?
Right, which anyone who watches the show Vikings and you're an American and you don't know the history over there, you know it from Vikings.
Yeah, you could just say you know history. You don't have to tell them you learned it from the show Vikings.
Well, that's where we know it from, East Anglia.
Right. It's where the Vikings came in and started a farming community after, years and years of warfare.
Right, yes.
Our ancestors, the Vikings.
A very artistic people.
As I drink from this Viking-like mug. Continue.
Sponsored by VikingLikeMug.com. Okay, so here's another account. This is the earliest account. Thanks, John.
That was the time. That was an ending bell.
Judging by your eyes, I didn't think that was a positive thing, but
no, it was.
Okay. Gosh, so much judgment. Okay, so this is the earliest account. Okay, now what I read previously was the earliest written account that we have in published writings of specifically the Black Shuck. This next account is supposedly the earliest account of the black dog phenomena, just as a larger whole in the hellhound arena. Okay, so the earliest surviving description of devilish black hounds is this account of an incident in the Peterborough Abbey recorded in the Peterborough Chronicle around 1127.
A long time ago.
And there'll be links to all of this in our show notes for those of you who want to dig deeper into the grave. Let no one be surprised at the truth of what we are about to relate, for it was common knowledge throughout the whole country that immediately after Abbot Henry of Poitiers' arrival at Peterborough Abbey, it was the Sunday when they sing Exsurge Quare. Many men both saw and heard a great number of huntsmen hunting. This is kind of creepy if you picture this. The huntsmen were black, huge and hideous, and rode on black horses and on black he-goats, and the hounds were jet black with eyes like saucers and horrible. This was seen in the very dear part of the town of Peterborough and all the woods that stretched from that same town to Stamford. And in the night the monks heard them sounding and winding their horns. Reliable witnesses who kept watch in the night declared that there might well have been as many as 20 or 30 of them winding their horns as near they could tell. This was seen and heard from the time of his arrival all through Lent and right up to Easter. So it's interesting because you're getting this kind of creepy description of like a dark, ethereal, almost demonic sounding hunt of these large black men on black steeds with these large black dogs.
What is a he-goat?
A male goat.
They're riding giant male goats.
I guess so. I don't know if that's supposed to tie it into the devil.
He-goat?
It might be to tie it into the devil because this is around the time of like converting pagans to Christianity.
It sounds like a lot of that.
Yeah. So apparently this thing that was described where they reference this dark hellhound, this black hellhound, is connected to, in this description, of what's called the wild hunt. Now, this is a phenomenon that I'd never heard before, but it's pretty fascinating. It definitely ties into that kind of Christian-pagan crossover, and you'll know by this description. So this is the wild hunt from Wikipedia. The wild hunt is a folklore motif that historically occurs in European folklore. Wild hunts typically involve a ghostly or supernatural group of hunters passing in wild pursuit. It is also about pagan youths engaging in hunting to have ecstatic practices to connect to Odin and the spirits of the ancestral dead, holding these events in their processions of certain times of the year. In the Norse lands, the ancestral dead are usually said to be the souls of dead warriors, Odin or Odin and a consort leading the hunt, and sometimes the hunt may tear men to shreds, bring dead loved ones or severed limbs to the hunter instead of achievements. Seeing the wild hunt was thought to foretell some catastrophe, such as war or plague, or at the best, the death of the one who witnessed it. Again, going back to that kind of banshee lore.
Yeah,
right?
omen.
The omen lore. People encountering the hunt might also be abducted to the underworld of the fairy kingdom. It was also believed that people's spirits could be pulled away during their sleep to join the cavalcade.
Cavalcade?
I thought there was an L too, but it's cavalcade.
It's cavalcade.
It's cavalcade. Thank you, John.
It's a good word.
Good for our glossary, Bleeful glossary. We'll have a couple of those in this episode. But I just thought that was interesting that around that time in the Middle Ages, when was this? This was around the 12th century, right? 1100s.
Yeah.
You had this experience that people were seeing these dark-clad figures in this devilish, loud hunt in the wilderness, this wild, raw, and that phenomena could have been just this kind of collision of the pagans from the Nordic lands coming over into England and settling and practicing their pagan rites and having these, these hunts and they're boisterous people. And then you have these quiet Christian people that see this as like this devilish kind of in the night. But maybe there was some kind of, Odin magic propelling force that actually gave them some kind of supernatural potency or visage.
Well, it's interesting to think you could totally see it as, you're right, the collision of cultures where they're seeing these things they've never seen before. They're terrifying, hideous, Northmen coming down and rampaging through the landscape. But at the same time, if you believe in any of the sort of any sort of magic or supernatural, mystical things in our world, if you believe any of that's real, it's interesting to think that the old gods, things like this, what if they did exist, what you call them interdimensional beings or whatever, but what if they used to have more power?
What if they're called demons?
Or demons, that's another thing. I think it's more interesting.
Or different words for the same thing.
Different words for,
same kind of
potentially.
Difficult to understand level of existence.
Right.
Like we talk about that with the jinn and the crossover of all these archaic ideas.
It seems like there's destructive forces that have existed forever.
Right. There's positive, destructive, and neutral. And there's these entities that exist in the balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously not all the gods of the northern folklore or mythology, if you want to call it mythology, not all that's destructive. A lot of it's good, benevolent, godlike figures.
Well, I think in the pagan tradition, there's a lot more gray area where different gods or entities, demigods, fairies, what have you, they have this ability to be more neutral, where they can be malevolent and dark. And a lot of times, sure, they do have this kind of darker, malevolent description and decree for their work. But then there is a lot where it kind of blends, where they can be benevolent and negative. And a lot of it comes down to the strength and the will of the individual. So if you come to these beings with intent and with strength and goodwill, and you're not weak about it, then you'll find grace and benevolence and camaraderie even.
And help.
But if you're weak or you're weak in your will, you may find it to be a destructive power. And that's what is represented in the Black Shuck in a lot of ways. In these Black Hounds too, is and that'll come up. I actually have a part coming up here about summoning the hellhound and an actual description of how to do it. But that's one of those things is in any of these things, you don't want to appear weak. You want to come with a certain level of confidence and strength in your will.
Yeah, and that'll tie in later to the Loch Ness and Allister Crowley situation with the summoning of spirits out in Scotland. And it always seems like it always comes down to, it's never a good idea to try to summon something. You're a human person trying to grapple with these eternal concepts.
You have no control over at all.
Right.
It's a lot of hubris to think I'm going to be the one that can
harness the power.
I'm the one with the pure heart. And it always ends in catastrophe.
Crowley had a real pure heart.
Well, in the beginning, he did. Initially, when he was young.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. When he was, a little boy?
Before this ritual.
This is what's interesting is there's an idea, because you always hear people arguing about
He's the one that was do as thou wilt, right?
Right.
Yeah, later in life.
Well, and the full verse is, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It's something about love under will.
Yeah, love is the main thing. Do what you will, but always love comes first.
Love under will?
Yeah.
Or love over will or something like that.
Love under will, but it means you must be controlled, I think is the general idea. You must have control.
Yeah, love comes first and then do what you will after love. So love everything else, love yourself.
Well,
I don't think
I think it's
well, we're going to get into that later.
It's an interesting concept, the idea that Crowley was an arrogant man, obviously, and very ambitious, and he thought he could do this because we'll get into the point of the ritual, but it wasn't evil according to the original ritual.
Yeah, when he started out, it was for the good of mankind. That was his intention initially.
And it was for the Lord of Light.
Yeah.
But he did something, or he neglected to do something in the ritual that we'll cover that may have led to a corruptive force in his life that turned him into this kind of darker version of himself.
Because he neglected to do something in a ritual?
So we'll get into it.
We'll get into it.
Okay, it sounds a little ridiculous to me.
Well, you don't even know what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, just wait till you hear it and then...
It just doesn't...
Have you heard of possession?
I have, but because you do something wrong in a ritual, like your will is subverted and you become a different person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we'll get into
Okay.
it. But yeah, before we jump into that aspect of the story, so I'm gonna get into the final bits of this, the hellhound thing, because it does get a little more concrete in a sense with some of the reports. So there were two major events to give the Black Shuck some real weight in our history here, and this was the two coinciding events at Bungay and Blythburgh. So I'll read you this little excerpt here. One of the most notable reports of Black Shuck is of his appearance at the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh in Suffolk. On the 4th of August, 1577, at Blythburgh, Black Shuck is said to have burst in through the doors of the Holy Trinity Church to a clap of thunder. He ran up the nave, past a large congregation, killing a man and a boy, and causing the church steeple to collapse through the roof. As the dog left, he left scorch marks on the north door, which can be seen at the church door to this day. The encounter on the same day at St. Mary's Church in Bungay was described in A Strange and Terrible Wonder by Abraham Fleming in 1577. So this is the account of another church where this
It
happened.
was the same night, right?
Same night,
Same dog?
same dog. That's the idea. Okay, so this is the account from St. Mary's Church in Bungay. This black dog or devil dog in such a likeness, God he knoweth all who worketh all, running all along down the body of the church with great swiftness and incredible haste among the people, in a visible form and shape passed between two persons as they were kneeling upon their knees and occupied in prayer, as it seemed, wrung the necks of them both at an instant clean backward, insomuch that even at a moment where they kneeled, they strangely died. So yeah, that's creepy, right? The idea that like this creature bursts in through the chapel, kills people, and as the description seems to suggest that as people were kneeling, wrenches their necks backward,
Yeah.
and they die on the same night that this other church collapses due to, well, skeptics would argue it was due to an electrical storm and lightning and the steeple collapse, and they attribute it to a black dog running through the...
Sounds like a false flag.
It's a false flag.
It's a false black dog flag.
But the coincidence of those two events, they're occurring at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Two churches having these terrible events occur from this black dog running through in this night. Of course, could all be hearsay, mythology.
I like the concept with you include the lightning in there. It's so much more
Well, it's a
like...
thunderclap.
Well, struck by lightning, though, right?
Well, supposedly.
Yeah. And then at the end, when the dog disappears, when it runs out the door, there's still a burn mark on the door. It's still there today.
Yeah, to this day, you can still see the scorch marks, which people have referred to since then as the fingerprints of the devil. Because it's the scorch marks
Right.
supposedly of the claws of the dog as he slashed through, escaping from the collapsing church. Rare. I'm sure that's the sound he made, Chris. Rare. It's Jeff Goldblum. So I think that's the most profound account because you actually have the destruction of at least one of these churches in this event, and you have people reporting on it. The people at the time writing of fairly recent accounts, secondhand accounts to be sure,
Yeah.
but accounts of what happened in that area. And then, of course, you have the skeptics who suggest, like I said, an electrical storm. And this is from Wikipedia. Dr. David Waldron and Christopher Reeve of Superman fame.
I was going to say Superman?
Not that Christopher Reeve. Suggest that a fierce electrical storm recorded by contemporary accounts on that date, coupled with the trauma of the ongoing Reformation, may have led to the accounts entering folklore.
So because of the culture at the time and the thunderclap outside the steeple,
Because of the Reformation, I guess. And
then all of a sudden everybody saw black dogs running in and killing people?
yeah, it's a little bit of a stretch, but so is the idea of a ethereal
Standing
black dog.
upright
Running
black dog.
Yeah, well, and he doesn't stand upright. There's no accounts of that in the Black Shuck.
Oh, okay. I
They
guess
do
I just
say-
assume that because of Dogman.
Well, they say he's the size of a horse, and I think there may be
He really? The size of a horse
It's
on
a big
four?
dog.
in some accounts. Yeah,
That's
terrifying.
really
It's like an evil
terrifying.
Clifford.
No, Clifford was like the size of a house.
That's true. But he had to grow, right? He wasn't born that way.
No.
That's the other thing. Where did Clifford come from? I mean, did he get that
It's
big
a
eventually?
story.
Because was his mom giant too?
Came from the imagination of a child book writer.
painful birth. Yeah.
Okay.
I like the idea of a dog the size of a horse, though. That's pretty freaky.
Yeah, so some accounts of the Black Shuck of actual witnesses, and some more modern, have him at the size of
I think of
a large
Jake
dog
as
or
the size of a
horse.
horse. That'd be so
yeah,
scary.
dude, terrifying.
Yeah.
That's scarier than a lion.
And you can find these accounts online, different people with these kinds of reports to this day, where this still occurs.
Now, how big were those wolves? What are they called? Prehistoric wolves?
Dire wolves.
Dire wolves.
Yeah.
How big were those? Those weren't I guess they weren't that big. We talked
they
about
could
them.
be
They're not
pretty
the
close.
size of horses.
No, I think they were like, we talked about them on our Skinwalker
They're big wolves.
episode.
Yeah.
They're big, but they're not horse size.
No.
For those of you who heard our Skinwalker episode, this does remind me of that story of
Yeah.
that
Indestructible giant wolf.
impetuous wolf that just walked right up to those people, and he was gigantic and didn't seem malevolent at first.
Yeah, he seemed friendly. He didn't wrench anybody's neck.
Well, that's the thing too.
in a church.
With the Black Shuck, you have accounts of both positive and negative. With the black dog phenomena, you have accounts of experiences where they are malevolent and foreboding. Rarely do they attack, if ever, but they usually signal the incoming of something dark, some tragic event in someone's life. But they also are said to, in different folklore, said to bring people to the afterlife, guard people from other dangers in the ethereal plane. You know, a lot of positives, companion-like.
Did you hear the comment from YouTube about this? About Dogman, like in general?
No.
Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Is this recent?
Yeah, I think it was the latest one on our Dogman episode. But it talks a lot about, I mean, I've never heard any of this stuff, but it had to do with how it's like it's a symbol of peace and, let me just read it real quick because I don't remember it.
Yeah, it's definitely relevant.
But it seemed, more like it was a good thing than it was like a terrifying thing. Let me find it real quick. Oopsie daisy.
I mean, if you could befriend a Dogman, I think it'd be pretty awesome.
So this is the comment that I was talking about. Wow, it's a long comment.
Really?
Wow, I didn't know it was that long.
Is it by a subscriber?
Oh, it wasn't recent. It was a while back, but they are real, but they are not smiling with menace. The smile is just that, a smile, their attempt to be friendly, and they're actually happy to see you when they smile, just like an expressive dog pet. Pet
They
dog.
eat you. Oh, so their maniacal smile might just be because they appear as a menacing figure, but they're actually...
there are indeed certain individuals that will harm man and have, but these ones in particular will either are usually manipulated to do it or had a psychotic break from extreme emotional torture, just as many humans would. I think I remember reading this, that it was like, I think he was talking about that these were like mutated.
Oh,
Like an experiment?
Yeah, but they're kind-hearted.
Yeah.
This is kind of an insane comment, but I was reading it. It just kind of reminded me of what we were just talking about.
maybe he has some sort of inside knowledge.
Maybe he's a Dogman therapist and he understands
It's
the
interesting
community.
to suggest that like some of them...
Time is coming where many of them will need help from people who will, and people should, because they have helped man for thousands
Maybe he's
of years.
trolling.
Wow.
It sounds like great fiction.
This wasn't a troll. I think this person really, his emoji is a lion head. Like he cares about animals. I think he's an animal lover, and for some reason
I'd like to get this guy on the show. Like, I want to know what kind of inside knowledge he has about the dog.
Read the comment. It's long. I would read it more, but there's just it's too much there.
That does go to the point that Dogman never really attacks.
That's what he talks about in there too. It's like if they wanted to kill you, it'd be over instantly.
Yeah, well, that's
you wouldn't
definitely
even,
true. Like,
you wouldn't even know it.
Why do they just play with you? Are they really just smiling because they're happy? Because that's an interesting point.
What if there's many that have killed people, but you just never hear about?
Well, yeah,
them
you wouldn't,
because-
right? That idea is interesting. Like you hear the terrifying stories about someone at night alone in their home, and then there's this giant dog man tapping on the window with a giant grin. And of course, it's going to look terrifying. But what if he's just smiling?
He's like, can we play?
Can I have some tea?
That is so funny to think that like it is this terrifying experience, but their smile looks scary because they have massive fangs. You know?
Well, yeah.
It just looks scary. Maybe they're just like, you want to play?
Right.
We're dogs. We
And
like to
especially
play
because
with
it's
people.
smiling.
Yeah.
It's showing an intelligence when
But
it's
a
doing
lot
that.
of times, maybe it is just their appearance, but a lot of times in those experiences, people say that they're drawn to it, but they have this like immense terror.
Yeah.
They just at the core of their soul is just like a black hole, imploding on itself, just like darkness and malevolence. Is that just because of the way they look? And maybe they are just happy, smiley creatures in the window?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. If they're real, and I mean, it's a fun thing to consider.
I'd still err on the side of caution and say don't approach.
Yeah, either way.
Don't let them in
Yeah.
to play.
People get chimpanzee pets, and you know how that ends. Fingerless, noseless, house guests.
I don't want to think about chimps. Chimps are terrifying.
That's true.
What they do to people.
Very strong.
But yeah, it's an interesting take on the Dogman, a benevolent creature. We definitely need to do another episode on the Dogman. Still a favorite topic, and you can go miles deep.
Well, you want to go to a break? Yeah.
Coming up in the next part is going to be interesting because we're going to get into the Loch Ness and the Crowley and the summoning and all that fascinating stuff. But we're going to have a conjuring right before that involves hellhounds. And maybe you'll get a little taste of how this can actually be done. But don't try it at home. Stay tuned, listeners.
Thank you for joining us.
Welcome back, listeners.
Welcome back.
All right, so we're going to wrap up the Black Shuck controversy. And the reason I say controversy is because one thing I want to mention quick before we get into the segment of how you might summon a hellhound, which you should never do.
But we're going to tell you.
We're not going to give you all the instructions.
You really think you can summon
We'll
a
have a link
hellhound?
for edification in our show notes, huh?
Do you really think you can
I
summon
know,
a
well, we'll
hellhound?
get to that.
Maybe not the physical, but if you're into that.
A spiritual hellhound?
Well, exactly.
If you're into like that dark demonic stuff and you want like to bring in a dark energy into the world,
Yeah.
I think you can.
I guess I'd want to know like where this person got their summoning spell.
Well, I will tell you.
Okay.
Okay. And it's not for dark purposes, but I'll get into that. So in, I think it was 2014, this is where the controversy kind of hits a little bit, and I think it's fairly subdued. But in Leiston Abbey, there was an encounter. So at the Leiston Churchyard, in a 1961 edition of Country Life magazine, author James Wentworth Day gave a secondhand account of a beast in Leiston, which he had been told about by the then Lady Walsingham. It read, "The late Lady of Walsingham often told me that she and Lady Rendlesham waited up in Leiston Churchyard one night to see the galley trot. They saw it. A huge black dog with glowing eyes suddenly loped up the road, noiselessly, leapt the churchyard wall and vanished among the gravestones." So
Silent footsteps?
That's why it's called Padfoot. Is because you'd see the demonic creature or the devilish fiend, but you would never hear it.
Do you hear dogs running in general? I mean, do you ever hear Jake running, or is it pretty silent?
I guess they all have,
he has
they all
a
have padded
collar, so I hear the jangle.
feet. The jingle jangle. They all have padded feet.
No, and
so-
actually, I hear the claws a lot.
Oh, yeah.
click, click,
But outside?
on the road.
Anything besides grass. I guess
Yeah.
grass you wouldn't hear.
Yeah, I guess in the woods you'd hear
I
it.
hear thumping though.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, he's a big dog, so
Yeah.
you'd hear the lumping, but maybe not. If Black Shuck, Old Shuck's ethereal, maybe you wouldn't hear that. So the reason I mentioned that specific encounter at the Leiston Abbey was because in 2014 at Leiston Abbey, during an archaeological excavation, the Dig Ventures team unearthed the skeleton of a huge hound, which immediately led to speculation that the body of the elusive Black Shuck, known to wander the land around Bungay area, had been found. So the same abbey where this thing had been sighted and is steeped in lore, they find the remains of this giant 7-foot-long canine buried beneath the church grounds.
That's a big dog. I read about that. There weren't really any markings to distinguish like whose dog this was, if it was a pet or anything. It was just they just found it. They did find it with pottery.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they dated it back to the same era, the same time period.
Yeah, but I read
Specifically-
that I read that there were 3 dates and they were each like 200 years apart.
Oh, did you read that?
Yeah.
Well, I missed that in my research. Okay, well, I'm bringing this up briefly because I don't think there's a lot of weight to it. The last bit here in their message was there was speculation that the dog could be Black Shuck, although analysis showed the animal had been laid to rest with some ceremony and may actually have been alive in the 18th century,
Yeah.
but buried in an older plot, a faithful friend given a fitting send-off,
That's probably more likely.
just like Jake.
Yeah.
So it's a very large dog, synchronistically buried in the same area.
Right. Well, and also I feel like all of this phenomenon, but these sort of that seem more ethereal than physical.
Yeah, would
I
they
don't
have
think you're
bones?
burying a body necessarily?
That'd be like someone finds the grave of the Grim Reaper one day. They're like, oh, he was real. Okay, so,
You get to the summoning. Is that what
Yeah.
you're about to do?
you know, I've looked a lot at the Black Shuck and I've read a lot online, and, you know, there's a limited amount of information, but it goes deeper to this hellhound legend that, like I said, exists all throughout folklore. It's in Greek, Eastern mythology, English, Scandinavian, Native American. They all have their reference to these black dogs. We mentioned the Odin.
Odin's dog. Forget the name.
The most interesting one I found that I like the most, which has relevance with modern accounts of people being escorted along the road, following them on their travels along old footpaths and stuff,
Yeah.
is the one from Japan, where a wolf-like demon called Okuri Inu was said to follow men and women who travel by night. If the traveler has a worthy heart, the Okuru Inu will protect him from other monsters. If, however, the traveler displays cowardice and clumsiness, usually by tripping or falling, the hound will devour him.
Oh, that's very unforgiving.
So it reminds me of like a metaphor for life in a sense. Like,
Like
All right.
credit card debt.
no, absolutely not. Gross. Why would you even say that?
Because if you trip,
Oh, then you're
it will
screwed.
get you.
Or bank overdrafts. Let's get into that.
Another great metaphor. No, but the idea that like there is this, in the pagan sense, like this
Right. It's a lot harder of
entity
a,
that's positive if it respects you. But
Right.
if it doesn't, then you will be devoured.
Yeah.
Right? So if you or anyone at home would like to conjure a hellhound, I would advise against it. However, apparently people do this, and I found this on a forum.
Well, one person does. This person that wrote this.
This one person, but it's a part of like a larger group of people that follow the occult, and they see it as like a gray kind of can be used for good or ill.
Is it so? It's like a golem. Is it under their service?
In this
it
ritual,
does things for them.
In this ritual, well, her specifically, she said that she had seen them already in her backyard. So this ritual is designed to summon them, like the ones that were already hanging around.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. So I'll read this for you guys here. This comes from Dulcis Infernus, is her screen name on aminoapps.com.
Does that mean sugar fire?
Dolce, chocolate inferno,
Chocolate fire.
something like that. She describes herself as an eclectic Luciferian pagan and somewhat of an animist, which is where you believe there's like consciousness in all things, plants.
Oh, right.
She studies demonology. So, I mean, she's been doing this for a long time. And I've actually read through a lot of her stuff. And it's very logical in the sense that she devises these rituals and has an idea of what the left-hand path is, the right-hand path, and that it is like, there's this evil idea with left-hand path, which is the Allister Crowley thing. But the idea in those circles is that they're both the same, different means to the same end, where one is against tradition and breaking down boundaries, which would be the left-hand path. And then the right-hand path is more following social norms, but also you're all trying to find spiritual enlightenment. Whether or not you believe in that or any of those perspectives, that's what a lot of people do believe in this circle where they might be raising hellhounds.
Okay.
So this is the ritual. It's pretty elaborate and it's a combination of various types of magic, it would seem. And she admits that figuring out how to summon them, the hellhounds, was a little bit difficult.
I'd hope so.
Outside of video games, I couldn't find a whole lot on them other than folklore and how to set them on people, which isn't what I want. So she doesn't want it for malevolent purposes. So I narrowed what makes their essences into 3 general categories. What I did in this was to create a tool that calls out to them and brings them. And actually, like, it's very logical in the way that this is built. And I'm not in this world, so I don't know anything about it, but obviously there is like a logical operation to this stuff. And she warns at the beginning, this stuff is dangerous. You're dealing with dangerous spectrums of energy that most people aren't used to working with. Death energy can be dangerous if it sticks to you and can make you sick. And black energy can be difficult to manage with similar repercussions. This is just a warning so you guys know to use caution if you decide to proceed. So a lot of it is like do at your own risk.
It's also like that's the way people get people excited to do something too.
Well, there's always that. There's always
it's like don't do this because it's like a little bad.
Right. So then she goes on, conjuring, summoning a hellhound isn't that difficult, honestly, which I found was interesting. The spell energy that
you just have to give your soul over to evil.
Well, and so their argument is that you have to, it's about control, which is like the Allister Crowley thing. You control your own soul and your consciousness and you have to control them, right? Which is often what people would argue that's the trick, is that you're made to believe you can control it and that it takes over you.
Right. And the difference there you'll hear coming up is that the Allister Crowley ceremony that he performs at Loch Ness is extremely intense and takes 6 months of, well, a lot of concentrated stuff we'll get into.
Right.
Well, the more effort you put in, the more you're going to get out of it.
But to say it's really not that hard. Like, that's very difficult, allegedly, to do this
That's a
kind of
narcissist
stuff.
right there.
Well, and she said that
It's really not hard. You snap your fingers and they come right to you.
she might be trying to tell people like, don't be intimidated. Like it's
Give it a try.
But summon the beast.
Tell us what it's supposed to do.
Okay, so materials, there's various materials and include like stuff as benign as like cloves, ground cloves and basil to more creepy stuff like
Eye of newt.
animal bone, grave dirt, black dog hair, candle red wax. Optional is blood, quartz,
Optional.
crystal
You
wine.
can use
from
high
someone-
fructose corn
And this
syrup.
is, none of us have looked deeply into this side of things. So like they come at it, I'm sure there are a lot of people that, whatever we believe, they believe they're well-meaning and are doing, exploring a certain path, but with positive energy. But you are messing with these dark forces. So, okay, so this is an example of incantation that she suggests to use. Okay. I call you up from the pits of hell, deep in dark earth, the hounds of hell. Come up.
So you're actually going to read the incantation?
No, it doesn't work unless you have all this other stuff. This is just a poem, essentially.
Okay.
And these are just suggestions. There's nothing written in stone
It hurts my heart.
or in blood.
That's a girl on a blog.
Come up, rise up from body's final birth. I mean, this is as much as Hocus Pocus. the movie,
Yeah.
Says you.
Dogs of the grave hill and of the black earth, sharp of tooth and long of claw, black of coat and gaping maw. Come to me, black dog of fate, come to your master and show your face. Now, if I see a black dog tonight, I will definitely think that
I'm going to send him right to you.
I said that rhyme.
It's too pretty to be a real spell. It's all in modern English, too.
She goes on, now the dogs and hounds are summoned. or have heard your call.
That was easy.
If you don't sense that, well, there's a lot of stuff, opening, closing, opening a circle, creating a protective space, but I skipped that stuff. So now the dogs and hounds are summoned or have heard your call. If you don't sense anything, try leaving room or walking towards a window or glass door. This is where it got creepy for me. You might see them outside. Go and bring them inside. They might be pressed against the glass. Open the window or open the door, whatever you need to do. Okay, now
Just let them
in her mind, it's like bring them in so you can control them and bend them to your will.
Right, goodwill, supposedly.
Talk to them, ask them if they have a name, keep their name. And this is often what you hear in these in witchcraft and demonology circles.
Familiars.
Their name is important. They often have the ability to talk, like dogmen, smoking cigarettes. You can take a bit of their individual energy and bind it to the tool so you can always call them with it without doing a ritual. You can just call them. You can also whistle really slowly, like you would for a normal dog, and call their name to get them to come. You might also ask them for a symbol or a sigil to summon them. Try anything. As she describes this in her honesty at the end, she says, it's a mishmash of hellhound charm and an actual conjuration. It's a few steps above a train wreck.
Yeah.
That's how she describes it. So she had to create this. There is no like hellhound summoning.
She just kind of made it up.
Right. She made it up based on, but a lot of this it's about like what your will and your mind can conjure, and using logical steps and imbuing it with your will and your belief, you can make these things happen. And I would not recommend it. I mean, all throughout it, she says, like, she starts about, it's really important to draw a protective circle, to open the ritual so that you're protected from it. And then you can gather information from these hellhounds or whatever. And then you have to close the circle down.
Right.
You have to lock it up. And as we'll see in the next segment with Allister Crowley's ritual at Loch Ness, he was interrupted from that closing of the ritual.
The banishing.
Which may have changed him for the worse, right? Which may have, maybe he did, well, you'll get into more of like who he was at the outset of that and what happened after the ritual to possibly change him. But the ritual is important, and I think it can have lasting effects. And people who mess with this stuff, I think...
Like you just did?
I didn't summon anything. I read a poem.
She admitted that she made that up at the end of her thing.
It's just a suggested...
That's what they would say.
It's like saying you can't read Harry Potter.
It's just, you can read it. It's not a big deal.
It's exactly like Harry Potter, actually.
Just go ahead and read it. It's made up.
Bizarre synchronicity, but Jess was talking to me about Harry Potter and how a lot of the instances in those books are actually the names of real demons and real, like,
she pulls from a lot of folklore.
Right. And the Black Shuck is in there. Padfoot is a character in there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of weird tie-ins that came up that synchronistically, we weren't even, when I was discussing this episode, she had no idea. And she was mentioning Harry Potter. But just like that, like incantations in popular culture and stuff, these things are said and repeated and all kinds of stuff. Does it have any effect? I think the will needs to be there. I think the intent needs to be there. I think if you read a nursery rhyme, there's no danger in it. But if you play with it with intent and you're not careful and you don't really respect it, there can be consequences. And that's my warning.
Like that's your own interpretation of it.
Thank you. Well,
isn't that what this show is?
True.
It's belieful.
Well, you have to say that after you do an incantation. That segment went way longer than I thought it was going to.
Okay.
Just way longer.
I'm sorry.
We're going to take a break. Okay, when we get back, we are going to talk about a little bit of Allister Crowley and some interesting stuff that happens when you don't complete your rituals and things go awry, and how that might have created a window area into our reality.
It created a Loch Ness monster.
Stick around.
Are back, people.
Welcome back, guys.
Children of the sun.
Children of the night.
Children of the corn.
Children of the evening.
We hope you enjoyed the first part, Black Shuck.
Yes.
You guys ready to hear a little about Allister Crowley's Loch Ness nest egg?
Oh, that's so clever.
Did you like that?
His Loch Ness nest egg. Is that where he had his savings stored?
You'll see. So none of us are experts on Allister Crowley. There are people out there that are,
Explain who Allister Crowley is.
Yes, expert. Expertise to us.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
So as we have heard of Allister Crowley, there's this assumption that he's started off with this mission to create a demonic religion or follow Satanism and propagate sort of these evil, perverted ideas, and he was the beast and all these things.
That'd be kind of like I wouldn't even say that's kind of like a overarching popular view based on obviously like the traditional Christian.
I keep thinking
society.
of Anton LaVey. It's not the same person.
He came later.
Yeah.
I don't even know what Allister Crowley looks like.
Yeah, you do. He was the guy on the side of the University of Texas library and that big face where he's like, has this weird, creepy face.
He's on Sgt. Pepper
what does he
record.
Look like? Does he look like a Satanist?
He looks creepy.
Well, he definitely plays the part.
He wasn't, he's not a Satanist, though. I mean, these terms are so difficult to
That's
put
the thing.
in play.
He created his own philosophy, sort of religion.
Thelema.
So he didn't believe in any sort of overarching forces?
He believed in, he did. He believed in.
he is a creepy looking dude.
Yeah.
Right?
Dude.
As he got older, and that might go into how he got that way.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get into. Is the kind of how the transition that happened. And there is reason to believe that the ceremonies that he performed at Loch Ness might have changed him for the rest of his life.
Irrevocably.
Maybe. I mean, that's one of the theories behind the things that have happened since.
So I didn't know this about Allister Crowley, and a lot of people might hear this and have their mind made up about Allister Crowley, but potentially what you were saying about Allister Crowley and his intention going into this ritual may have been like more positive from the outset, but
It was.
It was in the sense that like his tradition that he was following, which you'll get into, came from this more Gnostic approach of where you can tap into these forces and you can wield them to do good.
Exactly.
Right? Which is what supposedly the ritual was intended to do.
Yeah. So he believed in like a supreme God. He did believe in that, and in a good God. But he was raised in a very strict religious family, and it led him to rebel and look forth. He wanted to create a new philosophy, a sort of new religion. He believed that the religions of the past were outdated and that it was too restrictive. And obviously you can agree or disagree with that. But his intention was not to create an evil religion. His intention was to create something that allowed humanity to develop even further. And he had the ability to look into this stuff because he was born a rich kid. He had the means to spend time, to make the right connections, to buy the right property, as we're going to hear. But he was a brilliant dude. I mean, he was like a mountain climber. He was accomplished. Super smart. He could play chess with his eyes closed, remember all the moves.
Sounds like he had some help.
Well, there's an argument to that because these sort of stories come out after this Loch Ness experience. But yeah, his initial intention was to do good for humankind.
That's what the story goes.
Everything indicates that.
Okay.
From the beginning.
Yeah. So he started off with good intentions for humanity, and
How do you know that? Can you explain that?
in his own writings.
An example.
And even throughout
Just
his...
an example, like, of what that would mean.
Well, the very ceremony that he conducted at Loch Ness, there's history behind that ceremony. It comes from a book called the Book of Abramelin, which is a book that comes from an Egyptian mage who's a very devout religious person. And the whole concept behind this ceremony is to...
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to even breathe.
You can breathe.
I breathed deep, like I was going to ask a question, but go ahead.
Okay, so the whole concept behind that, well, I said how he wanted to make a new philosophy to update old, outdated religions that he felt were too restrictive, and he wanted more freedom for mankind, and for mankind to move in a trajectory that wasn't so oppressive. That was his whole initial goal, and his money and his family name, Crowley, enabled him to meet influential people in the magic world, the Golden Dawn. And through that connection, he was able to get his hands on magical occult books. And occult meaning, hidden knowledge, not necessarily evil.
And this book, the Abramelin?
The Book of Abramelin is this is an interesting word too, a grimoire? Grimoire, which means magic book. There's a whole list of magic books we could do an episode on just magic books.
It's a book of magic spells or incantations.
Yeah.
It's a grimoire.
That are trying to make the world a better place.
Just in general.
Sometimes it's, just in general, that's the name of a magic book.
Okay.
But usually it's to capture forces on our planet, and they're usually known as demons. And I think the misguided idea is to capture them to bend their will towards good. And that's the whole purpose of the ceremony.
That sounds logical.
Sounds safe, right? It sounds like nothing can go wrong.
Sounds like a really smart move.
Right. So this specific book tells the story of an Egyptian mage named Abramelin who taught a system of magic to Abraham of Worms.
Worms?
He's from Worms, Germany. That's what it's called that. And who is presumed to have lived from 1362 to 1458. And supposedly this guy was a really nice Egyptian mage. He lived in the mountains.
Kind.
Yeah, kind, only talked about being devout to God, humility. And he's the one who taught Abraham, the guy who wrote this autobiography with these spells. He taught him these under the condition he'd tell no one but his closest friends, people he knew, because this was divine magic, and it was real magic.
And it was powerful. You could be used for good or ill, right?
Right. Well, you can only use it for good, but if you don't do it correctly, then it becomes bad. And
So you can use it for good or for bad.
Right. It's a powerful tool. You have to be careful.
It has the potential to produce both results.
Exactly. And he said, only share this with your closest friends.
Who you trust.
Word of mouth. So now it's on Amazon. And if you go to beliefful.com, you can click a link. It'll take you there. You can buy the book. It's there.
That's not true.
But you can get it on Amazon because this has been hundreds of years later. It's been popularized.
Crazy that the internet age is like, here's an ancient special book that should not be passed around. Go to Jeff Bezos' website and put a coupon in.
So this book was his way to kind of bring to fruition his idea of creating this new philosophy to free humanity from restrictions of old, outdated religions and to find a better way to do good for the world.
You know how that sounds, though, right?
Well, from our background, you know how that sounds.
So what Chris is saying is the original teachings of the old religions were rudimentary teachings like don't kill, don't steal, those basic understandings for a childlike race of people that don't really understand morality. Mm-hmm. And so he's saying that supposedly that we know all that. Now let's work
change
on
it. And I'm not saying
which has a lot of hubris.
Right, I agree. I'm not saying that I agree with I'm just saying I think his intentions were not necessarily negative intentions
as far as we
initially.
could tell at the beginning.
Right. But this book was his key to try this out because this book had a ritual in there. And the text describes this elaborate ritual. And the purpose is to draw the conjurer's higher self or guardian angel, who then becomes a guide through instruction of magical secrets that will enable the conjurer to invoke the 12 dukes of hell. Sounds safe. Bind them, and compel them to work for the good of mankind.
And for the Lord of Light, right? Wasn't that the idea?
Yeah.
This sounds so ridiculously dark that you're conjuring demons so that you can harness them to create good, right? That's the intention.
It sounds like no one should try it.
Yeah, okay.
Ever.
Well, when you say it like that.
It's just, okay.
And a little side note here that's interesting is one of the two names of these Dukes of Hell, one of them's Leviathan.
This isn't a side note. This is the crux of this.
Okay, but
part
for
of the
now,
show.
it's a side note. Leviathan is an ancient sea beast with glowing red eyes, and he's one of the elementals or one of the spirits that he's conjuring at Loch Ness is a sea monster.
Okay.
So this goes into the kind of the folklore after he's there that Loch Ness might be
The Loch Ness monster might have been conjured
by Allister Crowley.
accidentally.
It might be the Leviathan, which is semi-ethereal, kind of falls into play there. And then the other one that is significant for our story is Balal. I think that's how you pronounce it. Balal is the other demon.
Pretty close.
Yeah, but it's the namesake of the manor that he buys, the Boleskine House. So in order to perform the ceremony, the book lays out 6 months of elaborate and disciplined specifications, including daily prayer, celibacy, and no alcohol. So
6 months of intense spiritual
Technically,
work, right?
it's prayer from dawn till dusk, and no alcohol, no sex for 6 months.
And this is where? This is all at that
Well,
castle?
yeah, so this is what brings Loch Ness into play, is he finds the perfect place to do this, because in this ceremony within this book is specifications on the place that you make the temple, and that he finds this house, the Boleskine House in Loch Ness, which is perfect. So he's drawn to this house, and according to Crowley, this is why, in his book, The Confessions of Allister Crowley, in order to perform the operations, quote, the first essential is a house in a more or less secluded situation. There should be a door opening to the north, from the room of which you make your oratory, which is where you're speaking the words and praying. Outside this door, you construct a terrace covered with fine river sand. This ends in a lodge where the spirits may congregate. And the river sand is really only for the purpose so that you can see the footsteps in the river sand, so you know that you're doing it correctly. So you can see
the footsteps of the entities.
Of invisible entities coming to your congregate at your location. So this is going well according to Crowley and according to history. This is, I mean, the process, he's doing it correctly.
Yeah, right.
But at one point, his mentor from the Golden Dawn, Mathers, who turns out to be kind of a charlatan, implores Crowley to come back and help him out. He's gotten himself into some, I'm sure, terrible, sticky situation. And he's begging Crowley to come. And Crowley's thinking, I need to finish this ritual.
You're not supposed to interrupt the ritual.
You're not supposed to interrupt the ritual. But at the same time, he's thinking, this guy, Mathers, is my only connection to the Golden Dawn. It's my only connection to these sacred occult books. If I lose this connection, my plans at developing this new philosophy to benefit humankind are going to fall away. So he ends up leaving the Boleskine House and leaving the ritual incomplete. And when he does this begins the stories afterwards of what starts to occur, and stories in his own words.
Well, and to run that point home real quick, any good Wiccan or witch or occultist will tell you, you cannot leave. Everything has to be undone. So if you build a sacred circle and you put pieces in place for this ritual, everything has to be undone in that order. You have to banish the spirits or whatever came, and you have to unbind the circle or whatever you have to do.
You got to move the planchette on the Ouija board down to goodbye. You can't leave it.
Exactly. It's another example.
You can't leave it open.
You have to bring the planchette down to goodbye. If you don't, then you are leaving the doorway open, which is what happened at Loch Ness, and that's the idea.
That's the theory behind this situation.
I just don't understand how you are doing this seance and watching, like if you're watching these footprints go back and forth, you're like, yeah, this is good for humanity. Like I'm creating a new philosophy. That's retarded.
Well, his idea isn't what it.
His idea
what it outlines,
is a lie.
Hold on, sure.
It is. Like he's lying right now. Though. Like
he's not
really,
lying. He's
he
following.
Really thinks that like
he's following this ancient manuscript that says if you do this, then you will.
But you think in his heart he's like summoning these creatures to make humanity better?
Yes, because in the beginning of this, before the Dukes of Hell or whatever that come that you're supposed to bind, the first entity that arrives is supposed to be your guardian angel, and that entity is supposed to.
You know how ridiculous this sounds.
Sure, the whole thing sounds ridiculous.
Right.
That's the point of the show. But he totally.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
He totally believed in this stuff, and the first step is getting your guardian angel there to come help guide you through these magical incantations to get these spirits there.
I want to show you a picture of him. This is the man.
This is why there should be a video podcast.
that felt that he needed to bring.
Is this a young photo or old photo when he was already corrupted?
Yeah, because there's the difference.
Well, here's the young photo. This man right here, Jeremy.
Yeah, he's wearing a cross.
This man wanted to bring.
He looks like Ozzy Osbourne.
There's a song with Allister Crowley from Ozzy Osbourne.
Look at that dude.
Yeah.
That I almost dropped my computer. Anyways, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
curse. Don't lose the connection. Let the dark forces win.
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
I know what you're saying though.
I get it.
Not a pretty picture.
It's a hard thing to swallow. The idea when you start having beasts going back and forth that are coming, but okay, so the idea is that there's a guardian angel that comes first, and that's the idea. Okay, yeah, I will follow you along.
Obviously, like I mean, if you look at any good fiction, it's that idea of like to achieve a really good thing. I think it's misguided, but I think that idea. You understand where he.
Do you think he was in his right mind when he was like, "I'm going to bring the guardian angel first"?
I think he was. I think he was deluded by ambition
and hubris.
I think he thought he could do it. I think he thought he would be good enough.
He seemed like he was out of his mind at that time. Like he was a narcissist, sort of like.
I think he wanted to outdo his parents.
I think he had an axe to grind for sure.
He had a really unloving.
Sorry,
that's okay. You done?
Oh, yes.
I think he had a really unloving. Strict religious upbringing where he hated religion because of it.
He wanted revenge.
And I think he wanted to outdo them. I think he thought potentially, according to this ritual, he could save the world and bring the forces of dark to light, bring the demons over to work for God.
Right.
And that would be his way of saying, my parents didn't know what they were doing. This is how you do this. And this is how we save the world.
Yeah.
All speculation.
All speculation, completely.
Well,
but then I think he got corrupted. I think that there was a corruptive force after leaving the door open. And I think that he became
You can see it in his eyes, dude. The dude is not a normal human being. Like, you can look at a picture of him even when he was a kid. He does not look like, maybe that's a little bit too much, but look at the picture as he got older. The dude looks like a Satan worshiper. He looks like darkness.
Well, that's the argument. As he got older, once he performed the ceremony, maybe it was all for good intention. Once he performed this, left it open.
I don't think when you have good intentions, your soul gets corrupted.
I think
like
that absolutely.
You don't really have good intentions.
Have you ever heard the road to hell is paved in good intentions?
Yeah, but you don't really have good intentions. If you have seriously good intentions in your heart, it doesn't get corrupted like that.
So if you have good intentions, you can never be misled and tricked.
You can if you have hubris, and I think this is the missing element. He was what was important. He had a major problem with ambition and ego, and he thought, I can control these forces and bring them to God.
Right, exactly.
So he may have stated, and he might have felt that he had good intentions to bring these dark forces to light, but it was carried on the back of ego, and that ego is what led him to develop these rituals.
There's a part of you that's lying to yourself. You can have good intentions, but you're not a pure enough person to actually pursue something like that.
Right, and that goes back to the Black Shuck. He would eat those that were not pure in spirit. Maybe that's a bad connection, but
I don't know. I don't think there's any pure enough person to do anything like this without getting corrupted.
I don't think anyone should be messed. Well, fair enough. Continue the story. I didn't mean to completely interrupt you.
It was an interesting point.
I'm going to be that man.
Actually, this is a good time to do. Let's take a break before we do. Let's go to John, you got a Patreon stinger. Because when we get back, I want to get.
That's a weird cutout.
We got some hardcore shit right there.
Speaking of hubris and ego and demons, how about we do a Patreon
lighthearted stinger for Zidane?
For Zayden.
Zidane.
Sorry, I always say that because it's spelled like that a little bit.
Zayden, you're not egotistical devilmancer, but we do have a patron stinger for you, and I guess this is the moment.
This is going to be a hard reset.
Yeah. Sorry. This is a weird change.
Sorry, my next segment is on the repercussions of him leaving the ceremony open. So I was like, on my notes, it says Patreon break. So I was like, hey, how about we go to a Patreon break?
That was a hard...
You're right. Sorry, guys. We could do a break and then come back and do it.
I feel like I need to...
Let's take a break and
otherwise
then come back.
It's just going to be too jarring.
Yeah, let's take a break, come back to the Patreon, and then we'll do the rest of it.
When we come back, remind me about my little Easter egg I have when it comes to Crowley and all this stuff. It's
okay.
Interesting anecdote.
I hope so. We'll see you guys in a bit.
Neat.
Hello?
Oh, you're back.
Hi.
I'm back too.
Oh, Chris, you're back too.
And listeners, you are back. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for being here.
We wiped all the blood up from the floor from me and John's heated debate.
It wasn't a
It
argument.
really wasn't that bad. It was good. It was a lively discussion.
We know you're a Satan worshiper.
And I know that you are a blind fundamentalist. So those are
Neither of those are true.
equally hyperbolic terms.
Exactly.
Well, before we get into the repercussions of old Mr. Crowley leaving the ceremony unclosed.
And the devastation of the ethereal plane of Loch Ness.
And Chris's dogged...
yes, my propaganda for the devil.
No, I was going to say dogged vitriolic...
Ooh.
There was a word for it. I lost it.
Good argument.
No, it
Good
was like
description.
defense.
Oh.
Rebuttal?
Yeah.
Repudiation?
Anyways, let's
Jeez.
play the stinger.
Let's do it. Okay, this is for a wonderful supporter of the show, as all of you patrons are. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Zayden.
This is from Zayden.
Zayden Star Shadow, thank you for all the comments. We've been watching you for a long time.
I hope that's a real last name. I hope he's like
It
a
is.
Native American from a space tribe.
Yeah, well, it's probably
Yeah,
not.
A
but
space tribe?
Yeah. That's a thing.
I guess they're all kind of space tribes. Or
I think
some
it's
of them are.
Zayden, right?
Yeah, it's Aiden.
This song is for you.
Here we go.
Satan Star Shadow. Fighting for belief, hold again and again. Satan Star Shadow. Leaving great comments as fast as he can. He joined the club, and now he can fly. He's a patriot.
Patriot.
He supported the show by giving Patreon 5. It's unbelievable. So unbelievable. Satan Star Shadow.
That was a good long one.
Fighting for belief, hold again and again.
I like this.
Satan Star Shadow. Leaving great comments as fast as he can. Satan Star Shadow. Fighting for belief, hold again and again. Satan Star Shadow. Leaving great comments as fast as he can. Satan Star Shadow.
That's awesome. You
Yes.
gotta go play an arcade game.
I know. I was like,
It's like he's the superhero of the show.
he's a
right
Star
now.
Fox of Belief Hole.
That's a high
It
title.
is a bit of a Star Fox recreation. I think the name kind of inspired
Yeah,
me.
Zayden Star Shadow. It does sound like a space warrior.
The best part of that stinger was just watching John mouth the words as it was playing.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I love
So
it.
thanks, Zayden.
Zayden, we appreciate all your comments, your interaction.
Yeah, well, he gave us that great Banshee story from last episode and just being out there and spreading the word of the whole so we can keep doing this. And all of you patrons, we love you. All of you listeners, we love you. And anyone who signs up for that $5 tier right now gets a stinger and supports us so we can keep doing the show. And we've got a lot of ideas coming up, and we have some changes coming up we're going to be talking to you guys about soon.
We're growing.
We're growing, and we want
like
to take
a little baby.
Yes, and we've said this many times, but we want to take this to the next level, and there are some things coming up that is going to help us to do that. But we need your guys' support, and so those who have supported us so far, we are immensely grateful.
Immensely grateful. And thank you to all the people that have been leaving
iTunes
lately on
reviews.
iTunes comments, reviews. Really great stuff. We are so grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you guys on iTunes.
Thanks to everybody on iTunes. Some recent people chiming in. Thank you guys. Gamer Queen, Cody Vick, Timmy Pinkerton, TJ62571, probably a Russian robot. Thank you guys and everybody else on there too. We won't go through all the names right now, but anybody who...
List a few more. We got
a few more in there.
Diana Lynn, 1227, or JD1491.
Thank you for leaving awesome comments.
Yeah, it helps us to know that we're doing something that people appreciate.
Yeah.
And we want to keep doing it because we're trying to collect great information and have a good conversation and share that conversation with you guys.
That's a good slogan. We're trying to collect great information and have a good conversation.
And you guys are part of that
Snore.
conversation.
Yeah, you are.
Everyone that's written in, we've got speak pipes that we probably won't get to this episode.
Yeah, sorry.
And some write-ins, but next episode, we're working on our formula to streamline a little more.
We are going to be moving into a new space here soon, which is exciting for me.
An old haunted house.
I'm moving into a new house, and we are going to make a podcast room in there, and it's an old 1892 house.
Ooh, 1892.
1892.
Awesomely creepy, but the vibes are good in there.
Yeah, it's a good vibe, but it's an old house, so I think we're going to make some really good content in there.
It's going to give us room to stretch around, come up with some good concepts.
And make more content. I think we're going to be able to do a lot more.
We want to give you guys more content. And like we mentioned earlier, we have a lot of ideas for extra content that's going to come out, both in the plus side, where we have membership signups and Patreon, and then a future membership of our own, as well as regular listener content that we're going to be putting out. So stay tuned for all of that. And thank you guys so much for your support.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
And now to get back into the weirdness of Loch Ness and further information into the darkness while maintaining the light, because that's where we're at here in the Bleef Hole. You never go down the Bleef Hole without a flashlight. 3 dings for that one. That's a good one. Oh, by the way, what was the guardian angel of Crowley? Do you remember his name? It's Iwas.
Right, which means lightbringer or bringer of light, doesn't it?
Maybe. But anyways, that was the name of the guardian angel that he supposedly contacted.
And your point being?
It was to guide him through his ritual and to keep him safe and give him the power to control the forces that he was summoning.
Right, which is a totally achievable thing.
Yeah, well, we've all done that once or twice in our lives.
Right, try to gather the 12
Doesn't
dukes
that
of hell.
sound like a lie something would say to you to build your ego up into believing something that...
Yeah, that's the problem when you deal with this world. There's always the trickster spirit.
He may have had good intentions going in. I'm not going to... There's no way to know his heart going into this.
Well, he didn't he left. He left it undone. He left it unfinished.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was because that guy implored him to come back to Paris.
And he didn't close the circle.
Didn't close that circle.
All right, Chris. So
Bring it on, Chris.
So after that happened, after he made that fatal decision to leave, this is kind of where the occultist and the folklore of occult suggests that this is what begins the sort of tragedies that happen at the Boleskine House, what begins some of the strange things that occur around Loch Ness. And aside from some of the more ancient sightings of Nessie, like the one from the
St. Columba,
who supposedly saw a water beast, excluding those, the first sighting of Nessie occurred directly after Allister Crowley died, which is kind of an interesting little thought snack.
Maybe his energy went towards the Leviathan.
Maybe that was sort of like his punishment for not closing that circle. He became that invisible entity. Maybe he made it manifest. Maybe that invisible entity that is Leviathan needed a death of a conjurer.
So you're claiming here now that Allister Crowley...
I'm not claiming anything.
He's the Loch Leviathan, is what you're saying.
No. Well, that's the other thing, too, is like most of the stories about Nessie before the modern stories are monster-like. They're not so friendly.
Not necessarily like a friendly plesiosaur.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I grew up on the idea that Loch Ness Monster was a dinosaur that somehow survived the cataclysm of the dinosaurs. I love that idea. I still have that idea. But this almost seems a little more reasonable if you believe in any sort of magic or spiritual reality to the world.
I mean, it just makes sense because you can't find it anymore,
exactly.
right?
You know, it's like anything, and especially the more we look into quantum physics, I know this is a stretch, but the more we look into the sort of permeable nature of our universe, things like this, the possibility of interdimensionality.
Permeable being the key word there.
Exactly. So who knows?
Yeah, for those like hardcore Nessie addicts out there.
Yeah.
That because that was my first introduction to cryptozoology when I was in
you had a
6th
huge
grade.
Nessie boner growing up.
It was big boner. I did
Nessie boner.
It was plesiosaur shaped with a neck.
Oh God,
linear.
really?
It had a tilt to it.
Too much visual.
So in 6th grade, I did a presentation on the Loch Ness Monster, and it went into the explanation of how it got there. And the idea was that there was a flood, and Nessie was around the area of the loch, and when the flood water subsided, it made its home in the loch, and then it was stuck there like a a prehistoric beast from lost times that had just happened to be trapped and survived in this, it was salt water that turned fresh water. And there's
a community
and
of
there's
them,
a
right?
salt line that goes through that, which may have been sediment from when it was salt water. So somehow this thing survived through time.
With a family, it couldn't just be by itself.
Right.
Plesiosaurs are not eternal
I'm sure it had a
creatures.
family, but it's much more likely that it was a demonic beast from hell.
Raised from
that
a
was-
conjuring?
Yeah, raised from a conjuring and exists there now.
You never know.
But to that point, on that side of that token, Chris,
So to that point, Crowley leaves for Paris to go out his friend, get him out of some hot water.
Mathis,
his mentor, and he kind of turned out to
Kind
be
of a dick?
kind of a dick, and kind of a
charlatan.
charlatan. But when Allie gets back, things start to. He notices
Did you
things.
say Allie?
Did I say Allie?
When Allie gets back.
Pretty endearing term,
Pretty
right?
close to this guy,
Feeling
huh?
strange, guys. Like something's inside me. When Allister Crowley returns to the
Good old Allie.
Boleskine House, he starts noticing some strange things. And here's a quote from his book. Besides these comparatively explicable effects on human minds, there were numberless physical phenomenon for which it is hard to account. While I was preparing the talismans, squares of vellum inscribed in Indian ink, a task which I undertook in the sunniest room in the house, I had to use artificial light even on the brightest days. It was a darkness which might almost be felt. The lodge and terrace, moreover, soon became peopled with shadowy shapes, sufficiently substantial as a rule to be almost opaque. I say shapes, and yet the truth is that they were no shapes properly speaking. The phenomenon is hard to describe. It was as if the faculty of vision suffered some interference, as if the objects of vision were not properly objects at all. It was as if they belonged to an order of matter which affected the sight without informing it.
He was seeing shadow people.
Basically, shadow
Sounds
people.
like shadow people, yeah.
Right on his terrace, right where these entities were supposed to congregate when he finished that ceremony. And it's almost as if they arrived and never were able to leave.
And this was after he came back, having not closed.
Not closing that
ritual.
ceremony, yeah.
Or maybe there just was no closing of it to begin with. Maybe it was just all a ruse.
Maybe. I mean, who knows? Maybe that book, the book of
Abramelin.
maybe Abramelin. I mean, we have this one account of this guy Abraham going up there meeting Abramelin, supposedly a really awesome dude, really nice, devout guy who believed in God, who had all these magic incantations.
It was
that-
all a trap.
Maybe this guy in the woods was really some sort of trickster spirit or something, that's some sort of darker. We don't know. Who knows? I mean, I think
Sort of sounds like it.
anytime you offer an ability to, even if it's a perilous journey of the hero to contain demonic force, first of all, that's a journey that should not be taken. So anytime you
Exactly.
offer that ability in a book, I feel like you're already, it's like the ring from
Well,
Lord of the Rings. You
you're
should be throwing it in
playing
a
to the
fire.
narcissistic quality of this
Exactly.
person.
So it's almost a seduction if you think about
Exactly.
it.
As far as Allister goes, it seemed like he thought he had it in him to like change humanity.
Yeah.
You can't do that, dude. You can only change yourself.
Right. Well, you can't take
Yeah, that's a good
shortcuts by
point.
like harnessing the Dukes of Hell.
Exactly. That's insane. I mean, he was if he really did have good intentions from the beginning, he was misled.
Yeah, that's all. That's my point. Is that we should leave that possibility open because that seems to be what the evidence dictates. Is that in the beginning he had good intentions. We can have a discussion or debate about what he became after, but initially,
But I think it's fair to say though that even at the beginning he was a broken kind of a person.
yeah, I mean, he started from trauma, but some people rise from trauma and do well, and some people come from trauma and there's a seed that's planted.
Right.
So, but nevertheless, he starts experiencing these things at the house, at the Boleskine House. And then he leaves the place, right? And there was a major in 1965 named Edward Grant, and he committed suicide in Crowley's bedroom not long after Crowley was gone.
So he had purchased the place?
He purchased the Boleskine House, killed himself in Crowley's bedroom, which is kind of weird. This is a quote from the housekeeper who found him. When I came up and went in the front door, there was this little bone at the front door, and they had this little doggy, Pigwig was his name, and I said, "Where did you get that, Pigwig?" Because they had this huge fridge and there was nothing in it. I took the bone and I just threw it. I went to look, and there, the army major was in front of the big mirror and his head off. I was so scared that I did run quite a distance, and I said, "The major shot himself." Anyway, I told the detectives this, and they said the bone was of his skull.
Oh, so she was tossing the
Skull
bone
of
from
the
the skull.
dead major to the dog.
And he was laid out in front of the mirror.
Yeah.
And isn't that mirror, was there any conjuring involved in front
Yeah,
of
and
the
I don't know if that was his main room, but he had mirrors installed in half of one of the rooms as part of the ritual. So I don't know, that's a good question.
Reminds me of that story in the last episode when you were talking about that mirror from the Warren Museum.
The Conjuring mirror.
Where that guy is trying to contact his dead loved ones for months and months.
Right, and those monstrosities came through.
Yeah, these terrifying faces came through.
Well, and that was one of the parts of this ritual, was bringing in a bunch of mirrors. Part of the adjustments he had to make to the house to make it this sort of temple to bring in these Dukes of Hell.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
Wonder what that major saw in the mirror before he
Right.
ended it.
And then after that, there's so many things that happened in the Loch Ness area that I'm not going to get into all of them.
But the villagers would avoid that area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. People in town knew, I'm sure some of them knew what was going on up there, maybe not.
It was said that they felt, without even knowing, the local community felt the heaviness there. So they would start to go miles out of the way, taking country roads far from the Boleskine House because they could feel the energy of this place.
And they didn't want to pass it.
And it started to become rumored in town that he was doing all these crazy things like sacrificing goats to the Loch Ness Monster, all this stuff. But other things, and I'm going to skip over these really quick, but some other things that occurred right after this, we had these experiences with the Owl Man, which was this sort of like high strangeness thing. You know, people argued that this is another elemental that came from one of these Dukes of Hell or one of these, whatever you want to call them, released because that ceremony wasn't closed.
Similar to the Mothman, right?
Very similar to the Mothman. They called it the Owl Man, but it was basically a similar kind of thing. Was the Mothman connected to this situation in 1930 or whatever year it was? There was an exorcism in 1973 where a priest came out in his like flowing robes, this old priest, and got on a fishing boat and he went the whole 60 miles around and blessed. He was like a famous exorcist.
On the loch?
On the loch. Because his idea was that it wasn't necessarily that Allister Crowley conjured this beast, but this beast was always this entity that existed here that was spiritual and that actually tricked Allister Crowley into picking the Boleskine House in the first place.
And that goes back to St. Columbo.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
I don't have the story, but I know the story.
The basic idea I remember of St. Columbo was before the Loch Ness Monster, before any sightings of it, was in the River Ness, which I think fed into the loch or out of the loch. There was a sighting of this creature, the serpentine creature that St. Columbo, who lived around the loch, had heard of it.
He was traveling up there to convert pagans.
And he heard of this and he went and sent out one of his parishioners or his followers as bait to try to get this thing to come after it, and it did. And then he had his own kind of Christian incantation that he recited to banish the beast, and the beast was banished. And that goes to show credence to the idea that this was
supernatural
spiritual entity that may have existed there before Crowley got there.
Right. So there's that argument, and the other argument for that story is that at that time, dragon bashing is what it was called, was very popular because it's what people were doing to convert. So you would say, oh, I went to this area and I found a dragon and I killed it in the name of Jesus Christ. And then, so you would convert people that way. So there was a lot of that going on,
that's
too.
That's us looking back. But also, it may have been a popular thing to do because dragons were real.
Well, we all know that.
There were these spiritual creatures that had to be banished. I'm just saying, it's possible.
Anyway, so there's those interesting anecdotes throughout, but as far as the Boleskine House is concerned, after Crowley left, one of the more notable people that purchased it was Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin.
Oh yeah, it needs to be said that a lot of our pop culture influencers, they follow Crowley in his teachings, and
that's a good point.
Yeah, he's on...
people like Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Back to the Beatles. In the Beatles, you had
Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The album cover has Allister Crowley's face on the cover.
Right.
And Jimmy Page, huge follower.
Yeah, he was super into Crowley. He had a bunch of memorabilia. I mean, he bought the Boleskine House.
I don't know if he was a practitioner, but he definitely was
I think
interested.
He was more interested. He was very involved in the culture, but I don't think he did a lot of stuff. But who knows? Although there was a story about him getting the whole band except for one member to do one ritual at the Boleskine House. But I don't have the information on that, so don't quote me on that.
But his friend... Didn't Jimmy Page get his school friend to look after the house?
Right. So that's what I'm getting to. First, I want to read this quote from Rolling Stone magazine when Jimmy Page discusses the Boleskine House that he purchased after Allister Crowley. There were 2 or 3 owners before Crowley moved into it. It was also a church that was burned to the ground with the congregation in it. And that's the site of the house.
What? Is that true?
Yeah. Strange things have happened in that house that had nothing to do with Crowley. The bad vibes were already there. A man was beheaded there, and sometimes you can hear his head rolling down. I haven't actually heard it, but a friend of mine who is extremely straight and doesn't know anything about anything like that at all heard it. He thought it was the cats bungling around.
Bungling.
I wasn't there at the time, but he told the help, quote, "Why don't you let the cats out at night? They make a terrible racket rolling about in the halls." And they said, "The cats are locked in a room every night." Then they told him the story of the house. So that sort of thing was there before Crowley got there. Of course, after Crowley, there have been suicides. People carted off to mental hospitals. So it seems like that place had a darkness around it already. Might have been one of the reasons he was maybe unknowingly attracted to that place.
May have already been a spiritual focal point.
Right. But yeah, going to your point about his friend, Malcolm Dent, Page's friend, Jimmy Page had hired Malcolm to watch his place because Jimmy Page spent rarely any time there after he bought it. So this guy raised a family in there, and he had some interesting experiences, and he knew nothing about Crowley when he moved in. Kind of like, reminds me of Jack, I forget his last name, but from The Shining, Stephen King's character, Jack Torrance, who takes over watching the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. It's that same kind of story, but I wonder if it's based on that at all.
Skeptic goes
Did
in.
he have that intense of an experience where he tried to murder his family?
No, but
he did have a intense
two
experience.
kids of one of the groundskeepers died there. One guy killed himself, as we mentioned earlier. And now, John, if you want to play that clip from his friend Malcolm Dent, we'll hear in Malcolm Dent's own words what he experienced there and why he came from someone who knew nothing about Aleister Crowley or what his friend had been up to over the past 30 years.
So this is Jimmy Page, guitar player from Led Zeppelin, his friend who had taken care of the house. This is a quote from him.
Yeah.
While living there for, a decade or so?
I think 30 years overall. He refused to leave, stayed there with his family.
Let's play that clip.
I had no idea why he'd bought Boleskine House, the estate. I hadn't ever heard of Allister Crowley. So arriving at Boleskine and discovering, one, that it has a history and a past, and a pretty weird past at that. Two, that there are certain things still going on there. Three, there are people who will visit the place to experience this and even practice it. And four, that one of my oldest friends seemed to be actively involved one way or another in this. There was a lot of things to sort of take in. Probably one of the first episode that made the biggest impression on me was sitting in bed or half lying in bed, and something outside the door of my bedroom was snuffling under the door, which it started off as if it was a dog and then became very much more powerful as a sound and as a noise and as an impression, to the extent that I snapped on a light beside the bed and was, well, I have to confess, very, very frightened, because it became extremely noisy and as if the door was going to come through. But I had a feeling as to what the creature was, and it was huge and very, very evil. And I was very, very frightened. Crowley, when he was raising the various demons and spirits at Boleskine, failed to banish all of them back from whence they came, and that one or two residues had been left behind. And he actually mentions that he had left this one bricked up, in, as he put it, in the center of Boleskine House. The room I was in that night was the center of Boleskine House.
It's creepy. The idea that, like, he actually mentioned that he had bricked up one of these Dukes of Hell, one of these spirits in that room, and he found it out later.
I'm not going to close the ceremony down, but I'm going to brick up this one in the middle.
Well, he left. He came back, and then I think he found these things.
So then he did like a Band-Aid.
Did what he could to bandage things a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's creepy. But then that guy lived there for...
Yeah, well, his point was, people say all the time, how could you stay in a place like that? And he said, well, it was a family home. I lived there before I knew what it was. I had raised my family there. When things started happening, we decided we weren't going to let this stuff affect us, which I think definitely would be a challenge, I would imagine. But
he didn't want to give it power.
Yeah.
And they seemed to get through.
Yeah, they were the last ones to own it that actually had like a normal experience.
Was this guy his friend?
This was Jimmy Page's childhood friend. And when Jimmy Page asked him to take it over, he didn't know the history.
Seems like a friend sacrifice.
Yeah, why would you tell your friend, by the way?
By the way.
Especially if you believe in this stuff. That's an interesting point.
It's called fucking...
courtesy. You just tell your friend if demons
obviously
might be
wasn't a very
around.
good friend if he's not telling him about.
Yeah, I feel like you should
the
probably
history
disclose
there.
that. I mean, you have to say when
Probably?
Yeah.
Dude, this is just, it's really hard to wrap my head around a lot of this stuff.
when you sell a home, you have to say if somebody died in there. This place had suicide, deaths, and
occult
demon
rituals.
summonings. Yeah, you should probably have to say
At the highest level of
buddy.
rituals.
Maybe demon or two
Maybe
walking
he
around.
wasn't such a good friend.
Yeah, doesn't sound like
Doesn't
that.
sound like that's what a friend would do. But anyways, great stories though, Chris.
Thank you. This was an interesting thing I came across today, and it relates. And I guess you guys tell us, is this a synchronicity? I felt like it was. I haven't even mentioned this to you guys yet, but I came across this today, and it's funny because the reason why I first got into the research on Allister Crowley's connection with the Boleskine House and the Loch Ness Monster was because, I don't know, maybe like 8 episodes ago, I had for the news segment that I ended up not using because you had a long news segment, but it was about Allister Crowley's manor coming up for sale again. And that was, I don't know how many months ago now. So that's when I started doing this research. But synchronistically or coincidentally, however you want to look at it, this just came out in the news. This was the headline. Last week's fire at the Loch Ness retreat of the man once dubbed, quote, the wickedest man in the world, has once again sparked fevered speculation at the so-called, quote, curse of Crowley. So it caught fire a few days before we started researching for this episode. For the second time this place has caught fire.
Ooh.
And it's been for sale for months. I just thought it was kind of timely, out of nowhere.
Crowley's ghost must have sensed that we were going to do
I mean,
an
I highly
episode.
doubt that was it, but it was just a weird
It's
coincidence.
just in the ether, and maybe that's why we picked it up.
Maybe it's just filled with evil, and evil creates fire.
Yes. Evil equals
Evil was
fire.
the arsonist. Well, it's funny, 'cause the plans are, this is going to be the first time where the property is not going to be a privately owned. They're not selling it to private owners. They want to develop it into a public space for people to vacation. And
Sounds like a beautiful place to visit.
That's called demon food.
Come let the demons ride on your back
Yeah.
as you go.
Take a ride on
Take
demonic
a
Nessie.
ride on demonic Nessie and shuttle him back to your
Demonic Nessie.
homestead.
Do you know what this reminded me of when you were talking about all this and we were looking into Crowley?
What's that?
So he had his guardian angel, right? Supposedly he was doing this for the light. And
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to- This reminded me of John Dee. We talked about John Dee. Remember scrying? The scrying mirror?
You were
In
so
last episode, you're
excited about that new word last episode.
I do remember that. now,
Okay,
yeah.
so he had his black mirror for scrying. And we misspoke in that episode. It was not John Dee. It was Ed Kelly.
What?
It was Ed Kelly, his assistant, who was a sorcerer, a magician of ill repute that actually did the scrying.
Oh, but John Dee didn't do any of the scrying stuff?
Ed Kelly was the guy who did like the magic, and John Dee was kind of.
Oh, right.
So Ed Kelly was the guy.
No ears or something weird.
He was a criminal, and he had his ear cut off because he was a criminal. But Ed Kelly,
As you do.
we were looking at Allister Crowley trying to talk to these angels, right? His guardian angel. John Dee trying to talk to angels with Enochian magic. And I was like, that's interesting. So I just Googled John Dee and Allister Crowley. And you know what I found?
What, Jeremy?
I found that Allister Crowley believed himself to be the reincarnation of Ed Kelly,
Really?
John Dee's assistant. And you know what's
Weird.
fucking crazy?
What?
Is the name of Allister Crowley's wife.
Oh.
Rose
Kelly.
Edith Kelly. Rose Ed Kelly.
Oh, weird.
Now, is that a synchronicity? Is it just an accident? Is it a...
No.
Okay, is it looking
not.
for connections?
Did he pick her because her name was Rose Ed Kelly?
Everything evil does seem to have numerology and synchronicity to
Well,
it.
I think...
And good too. But like powerful events,
Create patterns.
9/11 to
Oh, yeah. You can find patterns in all
word.
this
I mean,
stuff.
it seems intentional.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Well, I think there is this structure underlying our reality, good and bad.
Good and bad.
Synchronistic, like...
Synchronicity. We haven't talked about it too much yet.
Okay, so I just want to bring this up real quick. This is a personal anecdote that was insane to me. So Mysterious Universe, they just did an episode on synchronicity recently, and it was about retrocausality.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you this yet, John, but
Hold on.
I have never had something... Take a swig. This is going to be intense. Tell me if you think this is bizarre. And I don't know the meaning to this. I need to figure this out. This is my own personal mystery.
Better be good. You're really building it up.
I know, right?
I get a phone call. I get a phone call the other day from my neighbor, Davey, and I can't answer it because I'm on the phone with a client, and I'm like, I'll call her back. But I'm thinking it might be because her mom has moved in and there's loud stuff going on. Even though I've never gotten a call from this person, she's in my phone book. She's my neighbor. I put her in my phone book. But I'm expecting like maybe I'll get a call because her mom's moved in recently and
Right.
she's spending time at this duplex we live in next door. And the walls are thin. Maybe there's some noise issues.
Sure.
So I go to call her back, and a man picks up in a very boisterous voice, goes, "Hello, how's it going?" And I'm expecting my female neighbor, right?
Right.
Thinking maybe this isn't right. I'm like, I just got a call from this number. Mr. Valentine. How you doing, Mr. Valentine?
Weird.
And I'm like, my name's Jeremy. But
Cool name, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. But I just got a call from this number, and then he sounded confused, and he was like, "Oh," and mind you, this is coming from a number in my phone book, and I say, Yeah, I have a number in my phone book that I got this call from. It came up as my neighbor, Davey. And he goes, oh, my neighbor, on Mayflower Street? And I go, no, I live on Cherry Street. And he goes, oh, well, I must have dialed the wrong number. We must have our numbers crossed. And then I'm confused. And then we both kind of say our awkward goodbyes. And then I'm thinking, what are the odds that I'm expecting a call from my neighbor, probably because of stuff going on recently, and I get an accidental call. Someone accidentally dials my number from a number that is in my phone book incorrectly as my neighbor's phone number.
It's hard to comprehend.
Isn't it? It's a lot. This guy, who I don't know, called me, and I had accidentally put his number in my phone book as my neighbor's phone number. So when
crazy.
I saw the phone number come in, I was like, this is someone I know. Turns out he incorrectly dialed me, and I had incorrectly put in my neighbor's number as his number, and he calls me.
Almost beyond uncanny.
Trying to fathom that immediately after it happened, I wanted to call him back and be like, all right, what's your story? Who are you? There has to be some kind of connection here. This is so bizarre.
It's
really
what's funny about
strange.
that, if you look a lot into John Keel, his research, every time he was looking into phenomenon on Men in Black or ufology or whatever, he would have these experiences, and it was a lot of times related to phone calls where he would get strange phone calls.
I wonder
from
what
people.
we're doing right now isn't sort of stirring up
some etherical energy.
It has to be, dude, because the amount of synchronicity that we've gotten from what we've done is uncanny.
And this is weird because I looked and there's got to be some kind of connection, right? So I searched his number because we live in Ohio, and I looked to see if he's from the same town because he said Mayflower Street. So I searched Mayflower Street, Ohio, and we had just done an episode on the Warrens and Amityville and Annabelle. Mayflower Street, Ohio is in Warren, Ohio. And we had just dropped the episode.
Mayflower Street is in Warren, Ohio?
That's so weird, dude.
Yeah.
Really?
Ooh, that gives you a little chills.
It's almost like too much to even for my brain to wrap
It took me a long time to even recognize the bizarreness of it all.
It's really, really weird.
Yeah, and if we're going to wrap it up now here, this might be a good way to do it. Speaking on this synchronicity thing relating to this episode, I had an old friend on my mind because when you were looking into Black Shuck research, I had a memory about being chased down
River Road.
behind our old allotment, and we were being chased down by these black Doberman pinschers. And I remember, I was a kid, but I remember them having red glowing eyes and there being a feeling of a supernatural aspect to it.
Well, this was a special area called Dark Mountain that we used to talk about when we were kids.
Well, that we create in our imagination. Anyway, but we all tried to take cover. For some reason, we thought if we went into this
graveyard,
pioneer graveyard, all graves that are most recent one is from 1820 or something, and everything's dilapidated. We went in there, and these ravenous Dobermans stopped at the entrance, which the reason that story came to mind was because you were doing research in how Black Shuck or Dogman or whatever, there seems to be some sort of protective nature of graveyards or not being able to go into graveyards. So that came to mind. I was thinking about the story, and I was like, I wonder if Dan remembers this. I haven't talked to Dan in 20 years. The next day, Dan sends me a Facebook message about something unrelated. Haven't heard from him for 20 years. So I asked him if he remembered, thinking he won't remember this. And he said, I remember that. He's like, I have about as much memory in the detail as you, but I remember that day. He said, thank you for reminding me of that strange experience. I haven't thought about that in years, which was just another synchronicity. And there's an idea with synchronicity, especially when it involves other people and a connection with someone else. You're thinking about someone and then they connect with you the next day. I'm sure a lot of people out there listening have had this experience. And when it happens to you, it seems there's not a way to describe it really other than it seems more significant than just a coincidence. And you're right, John. I feel like these are happening more and more every day, almost to a level at this point where it's normal.
Yeah, it's almost like you can't comprehend the meaning. They happen so much, you just get... almost it becomes mundane, the synchronicities that happen. Maybe you guys out there in listener land are experiencing synchronicities.
Oh, anyway, on that note, I just wanted to read real quick because I think it was fourth grade, so a few years after this experience, I'd written an autobiography of my most important experiences in life, which were, not that amazing because
a lot of important experiences in fourth grade and below.
But one of them was about that story, so about that experience with those demon dogs that chased us down, and I couldn't find it, but I found something else almost just as interesting.
Something greater.
You guys want to hear it? This was written by Jeremy.
Oh, you told me that you found something. So how old was I when I wrote this?
Let's see.
This is a brother moment. Everybody hang in there.
I found this in Dad's office.
It's pretty old.
Yeah.
This is old. You
94?
Maybe 93. It has a title.
Of course I titled it.
This story is by Jeremy. It's called Babysat by a Brother.
Is this when John babysat us?
I guess so. Based on a true story, it says.
Based on a true story.
So this is Jeremy. One afternoon, my parents decided to go out. I overheard on the telephone that my brother and I were too much to handle or something. So no babysitter came. John, my big brother, volunteered to babysit. I mean big and bad literally. Later in the day,
He's big and bad.
Later in the day, my little brother, I guess that's me even though I'm 2 minutes younger, my little brother was eating as usual. Hold on.
It's true.
As usual, he had Rice Krispies with
Lots of sugar.
with about a ton of sugar.
Wow.
We were watching our favorite show, but John wanted to change the channel. So Christian, my little brother,
Because he deserved it.
flicked Rice Krispies at John. John jumped up and dumped the bowl of cereal all over Christian. Then John yelled, "Clean it up!" Although John did it. He tried to pull our...
Fuck you.
He probably said that too. He tried to pull our hair out by the roots. He trapped us in a corner downstairs. I found a crack in the door. I threw open the door and rushed out. I ran next door.
What a hero.
I just remembered Christian was still over there. I was on my way back when I heard someone yell my name. I ran to my house and Christian was standing there with just underwear and Dad was coming down the driveway. We were saved. The end.
Well, you know what I'm thinking? Maybe you shouldn't have been born.
Wow.
To begin with,
That's
I
heavy.
It
mean,
would have solved a lot of problems.
it would have helped me growing up a lot.
That had to be hard growing up with two annoying twins.
I mean, I've seen videos of you guys growing up.
Oh, I've seen
No,
them
I know.
too.
I felt bad years later looking back.
You
and
were
seeing,
intense,
You're
little
real obnoxious.
Yeah.
obnoxious. There needs to be a new word.
But
for
you
that.
repaid us with pain. You were
Well,
definitely you were the
obviously, that story
stereotypical.
was based on a true story.
Yeah, you can feel John's frustration in that story.
No, I
like,
get it. I get it.
These fucking annoying little fucking twin brothers.
Anyway, that wasn't a demon dog story, but it was close.
Anyways, we love each other now.
Yep.
Yes.
And people, I just want to say that there is good and evil in the world.
That is true.
And we're all making choices every day.
Looking at Chris.
There
Chris,
are
you're
good-
making
no,
your
actually, I
choices.
didn't mean to look at you, but I'm just saying, watch out, people, because we are in a war right now.
Protect yourself spiritually.
In my own little way, I'm saying evil is real and good is real, and you have to be a little bit aware of it. So that's my own personal thought to end the show.
It's good. It's good to have
That was
that.
nice, John.
Yeah, go out there, explore with protection.
That's-
Well, that did sound very
do we
like
need,
a
do we
guidance
need a new
counselor.
like demon condom or something?
Explore with protection. Demon condoms. Explore with protection.
It's a little straight to the point. Demon
Uh,
condoms are just gotta be named for that. Like hot rods or something.
Crowley condoms. Explore with protection.
No, that's not good
man.
either.
Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah,
It's been
we
a
had
long show.
It has
but-
been a long show. Thanks for hanging in there. We had a good time. Hope you guys had a good time. Thank you to all the patrons helping us take this to the next level. Coming up here, we got some changes and we're excited. And keep supporting us. We really, really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and
Yes,
thanks,
we do.
Thanks everybody that writes in and leaves thoughts about episodes, comments, suggestions.
Yep, we have speak pipes and write-ins to play that are way overdue, so we'll be getting to those in the next couple episodes. So,
Yeah. Oh, I had a correction that was fun, but I'll do it next time.
we had a correction about the Amityville horror that was not in
Yeah.
Connecticut. It was in New York.
New York, and they live in that town. Oh, we'll do it next time.
But I will say, Uncle Slapass did inform us on Castbox
I saw
that
his
the Candyman was based off of another serial killer named Dean Coral, I think it was. You'll have to correct us again because I'm too
Yeah, I like
tired
how you
now
go
to
into
look up the
correction
notes.
without actually getting
Looking
right
at
the
notes.
answer.
Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I think we're good for this episode, and we'll see you next time
We love you.
on The Belief Hole.